Hello, welcome to episode 222 of the Epic Film Challenge to 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, and this begins a 3-review cycle of films from the Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami. And this one is from 1990, and it is Close Up. Oh, what a film! You know, we're coming off of the highly controversial In the Realm of the Senses, which is the previous review for Asian Cinema Season, and the Epic Film Challenge 2, I suppose, which, you know, I did not get on with at all, and had a lot of abuse from that, actually. A couple of private messages and comments I had to delete, you know, and it bears repeating. They're movies, guys. They're films, you know. I don't see why people are taking it so personally. It is what it is. I have my opinions, and I don't claim to be some great movie critic and have this, you know, winning analysis on these films. I'm just reacting to them as I see them, and I can only do that, really. So it is what it is. But Close Up, at least I have some good things to say about this film. And this is the first Kiarostami film I've seen, although I saw a film that he wrote called Willow and Wind, which I reviewed previously in this Asian Cinema Season, which I loved. I thought that film was fantastic. But Close Up, what a story. I just love the story behind this film. So it's a documentary, but it's not. It's hard to kind of pinpoint this film in a digestible kind of buzzword. You know, there's no genre that this film fits neatly into. It's neither drama nor documentary. It's a blend of both. I think docu-fiction is a term that has been coined, and I suppose you could kind of throw this film into that, but I don't know what to make of a lot of this film. It's a film that's there to be deciphered for some, and to not be by others. And I don't know, I feel like I want to know what's real and what's not in this film, but I think the point is that you don't know. Some things you can definitely tell. Some things I'm not sure about. Now the story, I'll tell you the true story that this film is based on. There was a man called Hossein Sabzian, an Iranian, you know, man, and he was a cinephile. He loved movies, just obsessed over cinema. Loved everything about it. It was his life. And he was on a bus one day, and, you know, and he's relatively poor, you know, he certainly has no kind of high social standing. He was on a bus one day reading a script book of a film called The Cyclist, I believe, by the Iranian filmmaker Mohsen Makhmalbaf, who I've talked about in one of the previous Epic Film Challenge 2 videos, his film Gabba, which I thought was great. And a woman sits next to him on the bus, this is a true story, and she sees the script book and they get talking, and she said that she liked the film or something to that effect, and he said, oh, well, I wrote it. And she's like, you're Mohsen Makhmalbaf? He's like, yeah. And she said, oh, well, my sons are interested in filmmaking. He's like, well, I can give them a call and talk to them about, you know, if they have any questions or anything. She's like, yeah, great, that'd be fantastic. Big fan of your work. Again, I'm paraphrasing, you know, the story here, but, you know, he then gets invited into their home, and for a few days he begins to let them kind of onto the idea that I'm going to make a film and you're going to star in it and we're going to use your house as the location. He kind of looks in every room and scouts it out and everything, and starts rehearsing with the sons. You know, we're going to make this movie and stuff, and perhaps you can kind of help finance it. And, you know, the family, or at least the father, begins to suspect that this guy is not the famous Iranian filmmaker Mohsen Makhmalbaf. Now, what's really intriguing about the story is that this couldn't happen now. It'd be impossible. You know, Google, pull your phone out on the bus, you can kind of quash that instantly, right? So it's one of those things that just, it wouldn't happen now. But it happened then. And, you know, they eventually cotton on to, you know, the fact that he's not who he says he is. And he gets arrested, and he welcomes it, he puts up no fight. And he gets arrested for attempted fraud and put on trial for attempted fraud. And they think that he was trying to kind of basically, you know, mark them and kind of scout out their house for burglary. And so Close Up follows the trial of Hossein Sabzian, but it recreates the events of the true story with everyone involved. So the journalist who broke the story plays himself in the movie. The taxi driver plays himself in the movie. The family who got conned play themselves in the movie. Mohsen Makhmalbaf, the director, plays himself in the movie. Abbas Kiarostami plays himself in the movie as he introduces himself to Hossein Sabzian and says, can we make a movie about your trial? And Hossein Sabzian plays himself in this film and recreates those moments when he was conning the family. It's fucking crazy, and I loved it. It was so intriguing, it was so absorbing, you know, and the way that I was questioning all the little details. Like the judge, I believe, played himself of the trial. And the trial itself, it looks different to the rest of the film. There's kind of a grainier quality. They have the camera crew set up there. You can see the lights and everything, but they're focused on the subject who's standing trial. And I'm not sure if it was staged. I have no clue. I feel like it was real, but at the same time, the director in the trial is asking questions to Hossein about why he did this, why he impersonated this director. I'm not sure. I don't know whether that was real or whether it was staged. I know that he got involved and that he tried to get the process of the trial moved forward so that they could film it, you know, and kind of turn it into this film. But I don't know the specifics, and I kind of almost don't want to, you know, because this film questions reality in a super meta way. Like, it's ridiculous. The term meta doesn't even apply. It goes beyond that in this film, and I loved so much of this film. The performances, you know, and apparently Kiarostami mostly casts non-professional actors in his film, and you can certainly say that Hossein is no professional actor, although at one point in his trial he says that he probably would be a better actor than he was a director. And they ask him, you know, wouldn't you be a great actor if you could impersonate this director for however long it was, 4 days or whatever. And the trial itself is really captivating. The only downside to the film, I would say, is that there are extended passages of Hossein, the man who impersonated this director, you know, in close-up, in the trial, kind of waxing lyrical about everything that happened. And, you know, trials, they go through all the details. They go through everything. And it gets a little bit kind of procedural. I don't know, just kind of da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then I da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then I said this, and then this, da-da. So it went on a little bit too long at times, and I started to feel my interest wane a little bit, only because everything else was so interesting, you know. Especially when, you know, he's going back into the home that he entered under false pretenses to reenact the moment of him getting arrested. You know, that whole sequence when he gets arrested, you know, he turns up and he's like, yeah, let's rehearse, you know, with the son and everything. And the father's there, and he kind of knows, and he's got a friend there who he's told, I don't think this is the director. I think this is an imposter. And the police come, and Hossein is by the window looking at the police coming in. You know, that whole scene is so tense. It got me in the chest, even though I know what happens. You know, I know that nothing really bad happens to him, but it's that idea of your lie being exposed, and I think anyone can relate to that. You know, if you're telling me that you've never lied, then you're lying. You know, then you started, because I think everyone has lied, even white lies. You know, and I think everyone has been caught out in a lie. You know, even if it's like, you know, have you done your homework? Yeah, I have. You know, well, let's see it then. Shit. You know, there's been so many. You know, for me over my life, it's just one of those things. I remember when I went to the cinema to try and get into a showing for the under 16 price. You know. And just getting caught out because someone said, what's your birth date? And I told them the date that made me older instead of younger. And she's like, oh, so you're 17 then? And I went, you know, just the idea of getting caught in your bullshit, basically. It's not fun. It really isn't. And this is kind of a big example where the police are coming after you for this lie. So I just was so in the zone of feeling what he was feeling. From his perspective as well, because there's a guy who comes in to kind of verify, because he knows what the director looks like, and so he comes in and he sees the guy, but he makes it kind of, you know, really kind of smooth. He doesn't kind of go, oh, and look at him. He kind of, oh, hello, how you doing? You know, and so as Hossein's sitting there, it's not immediately apparent that they've just caught him out, and he's like, can I just talk to the, pulls the father aside, and you don't hear what they're saying. You know, us watching the film, we don't hear that conversation, much like Hossein. So we're put into his perspective in this scene. And so you really feel it. You feel the kind of tension, even though you know everything that's happened before, because the film opens with this 15-minute prologue of the reporter in the taxi heading to the house to kind of verify that this guy is an imposter. And so he kind of sets up the whole story for you in the taxi car, which is a great little sequence. And they park outside the house. And there's this wonderful little moment where the taxi driver gets out, and there's this big pile of leaves with some, like, you know, thorny kind of roses and flowers and stuff. And he picks some of them out, and this aerosol can rolls off the pile of leaves onto the floor. And he looks down, I think he kicks it, and it just starts rolling, just down the hill. It goes on for about a minute, and it just captivated me. I don't know what it was. You know, and it's one of those things that could just be such a bullshit moment in a film. Like, why we're looking at this fucking, you know, deodorant can rolling down a hill for 45 seconds. But I was just like so gripped in the setup of the story that when we got to the rolling can down, it was almost like a breather, you know, which can often happen when you're in this situation. And especially from the perspective of this taxi driver who had picked up this reporter who was like, yeah, there's this crazy story about this guy who impersonated the famous film director, and we're going to go and we got the police, we're going to go arrest him now. And it's like, oh, this is kind of exciting. And then you got to sit in the car and wait for like 5 minutes. So it's kind of like when you're in one of those situations where you get thrust into an exciting story and then you've got to kind of just wait around for the next part, you know. You know, when you're in one of those situations, it just linked me into that feeling very tightly. You know, he looks up and there's a plane flying overhead. You know, I just love that sequence. There's something about it. I was just like, this is great. I'm really enjoying this. And then it changes, you know, where we go back and forth and we see the initial meeting of Hossein in prison with the director of the film, Abbas Kiarostami, and he's like, can we film you for this movie? You know, and he's like, I'm Abbas Kiarostami, and Hossein's like, oh yeah, I've seen your movies, I'm a big fan of yours, you know. But I think that was staged because it was shot with a nicer camera, but it's shot to look like it was, you know. But I don't know, maybe it was, you know, I mean, they could have done it. That's the thing, it blends the idea of what's real, what's fiction, and even then, if you strip away this kind of element of them recreating the not even the scenes, but recreating the actual real-life events, there's still the idea of what's really real, you know. And when Hossein is there on trial, and he's talking about how impersonating this director for him wasn't a malicious thing, it just slipped out, and he decided to go with it, because for him, you know, for him in his life, he was worth nothing. You know, in terms of social standing, you know, he's just dirt, basically. But in pretending to be this famous director, he felt respect for the first time in his life. You know, he felt like he meant something. You know, it's heartbreaking, it really is. And you really feel empathy for this guy and the way that he's talking. And he definitely seems like he's someone who's a little bit, you know, has a screw loose, maybe. But I didn't get the sense that he, you know, was dangerous. I got the sense that he was just very lonely and very confused, and had a huge love for film and no way to kind of let it out, no means to ever pursue it, you know, because of his you know, his monetary situation. There was just no way, basically. And that is kind of the silver lining of the film, is that this guy who loved film and made this kind of, you know, fairly big mistake in kind of, you know, deceiving people, he became a part of cinema history in this fantastic and unique and wonderful film. And I'm going to put up another video which is reviewing a documentary that came out 5 years after this, or 6 years after this, that follows up with Hossein and how he feels about his life after Close Up, and appearing in that film, acting in that film, having his life put into that film, and how he feels about that. And it's a very interesting documentary, that one, but I'll leave that to the other video. So yeah, I mean, he delves into that idea in the trial of how, pretending to be this famous film director, he was able to feel what it was like to be a director, maybe, you know. And when he was kind of pretending to, you know, rehearse with this family to make this film that was never going to happen, you know, he started to, you know, feel like this is what one of my idols would do. And so he got to kind of really, in a big way, kind of enact this wish fulfillment. You know, he feels very remorseful for what he did and so on, and he did lend some money from one of the sons. I'm not sure how much it amounts to, but that was kind of the key thing, where they thought he lent money from us. We think he was trying to pilfer money from us, basically. And to him, he's like, you know, that was never a part of it. He seemed to really express remorse, and, you know, by the end of it, spoilers, he, you know, doesn't really face any heavy charges. But the family, especially the sons, feel betrayed and kind of hurt by this, and so they don't easily pardon him. So it's interesting to see him kind of basically get to tell his story. Again, he talks about how much he loves films and how much they affect him, how much they're part of his life. And being this director, you know, for a few days was something that kind of, you know, helped him in some ways, but hurt him in a bigger way. And it's a cautionary tale about becoming too obsessed, I think, with anything. You know, following it down a road that is just, it ain't worth, you know, even starting on, basically. But, you know, overall it's a story where no one got hurt, and it makes for a hell of a story and a hell of a film, but it's certainly not something that anyone should do. So, you know, there's two schools of thinking about it. There are people who look at this and they think very negatively on this man, and they think he's a real creep, and so on. There's other people who feel more empathetic towards him, and I feel that way, I think. I can kind of relate to it almost, and, you know, feeling lonely in my life. And if I could imagine that kind of feeling of loneliness and despair and kind of just maximize it to a life where I had nothing and I was living in poverty and my wife left me because I had nothing, you know. How far would I take, you know, fantasy in my life? How far would I take wish fulfillment? How far would I take trying to escape any way possible? You know, there are people who drink to escape from their despair and their woes. There are people who do all sorts of different things and they spiral out of control. And this guy, without ever really meaning to, found a way of escapism and pretending to be someone else. But the film itself, it's especially in the final scene, which is really interesting. It looks intentionally filmed to be, you know, real, you know, and there's this microphone on the real life director, Mohsen Makhmalbaf, as he drives with Hossein on his bike to go and meet the family and kind of apologize after the whole incident is blown over. And they're on the bike and they're kind of talking, and you know, Hossein is getting to meet this guy who he pretended to be, who he's a big fan of, and he hugs him and stuff, and they start talking, but the microphone on Makhmalbaf starts going in and out. And you hear the camera crew in the truck going, "Oh shit, we're losing sound." Oh, it's a 15-year-old, you know, sound jack or whatever. And so we lose a lot of that conversation as they're driving along, and it's just like, yeah, so, and you know, I feel like that's definitely intentional, and it's there to kind of, you know, just to quite make you question it, you know. And I like that. I like the kind of the blurring of the lines, and a lot of people hail this as this great masterpiece and stuff, and a great kind of case study on fiction and reality and how they work together and how movies tie into that as well. And that's again something that Hossein was saying. Well, not Hossein, but when he was talking about, you know, his motives behind doing this impersonation, one of the sons of the family that he tricked said that, you know, he says that he's, you know, remorseful and everything. He says that he's sorry that he did it, but I think this is another act. I think he's still acting, you know. And then that brings in a whole other kind of topic is, you know, in real life, are we always acting? You know, when we're out in public, are we different people when we're around other people? You know, what's our true self? Because certainly me, sitting in front of this camera right now, this isn't my true self, you know. I'm not like this in real life, you know, but that's because the people I know in real life, you know, wouldn't wouldn't sit down and listen to me talk like this about a film for fucking 20 minutes, you know, so I don't say anything. I say, oh yeah, there's this good film called Close Up. It's about a guy who, in Iran who, yeah, no, okay, no. You know, there's people like maybe Connie or my mum. My mum is someone who I can really get into a film. Well, I'll just basically tell her a whole film, you know, because it's quicker for her than to watch it. And we can discuss it, you know, that way. So I can talk to my mum about films like that. But, you know, beyond that, in real life, there's not many people, you know. So in a form, this is an act, but it's still part of me. It's still my real feelings on stuff. But it's almost a faux performance in a way, making videos like this, I think. Because it's not part of my real day-to-day life, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But it's an interesting question to raise about yourself and other people, and this film just encapsulates that, I think, in this crazy real-life story, which I thought was just fantastically realized in this, you know, again, unique film. So, is it a film you should see before you die? Without a shadow of a doubt. I wouldn't call it masterpiece level. You know, again, I do think some of those trial sequences drag on a little bit too long. And then there's even a moment in the follow-up documentary, which was not directed by Kiarostami, that follows Hossein years after the release of Close Up. You know, there's a lot of him just, again, waxing lyrical about his thoughts on films and stuff, and how they affect his life. And at the end of the film, he goes, okay, I'm talking myself into a circle here. I feel like I'm on a soapbox. Let's just cut this. You know, and that's how the film ends. And I feel like that could have been done in close-up. Maybe just trim some of his scenes of just describing what he was doing in all these moments. And that's another cool thing, is that there's a lot of pieces to the story of him impersonating this director and deceiving this family. They only really recreate, like, I think 3 or 4 moments, basically. The rest you hear about through the journalist, or, you know, from Hossein himself, or the family, you know. So I like how a lot of it is in our imagination as well. But then there are those very key moments, like when he is sat on the bus and the mother sits next to him. They've recreated that scene, and that must have been quite a trip, you know, when you've lied to someone and really kind of deceived them, and then you have to basically reenact it, you know, for a film. It's very strange, very odd, but hey, he got to be in a film, you know, and got to be a part of film history, for better or worse. He died, I guess it would be about 15 years after the film. He was only 52, but not much was really, I haven't found much information about the guy following close-up, apart from the documentary close-up long shot, which I'll be talking about in a separate video. So anyway, definitely a film you should see before you die. An incredible introduction for me to Kiarostami's work, and I hope that the style of filmmaking is certainly something that continues throughout his films, because I'm sure that none of his films are going to be quite as wild and different as this one. But even outside of the concept of this documentary slash fiction slash reenactment slash what's real, what's not, just the way that the film was shot and the way that it was presented and the acting, you know, which is all by people who aren't really actors, I loved. I really enjoyed just the style of it, the naturalistic feeling that I got from the film. The camera work is very smooth, and I just thought it looked really good. So yeah, overall fantastic film. If you've seen it, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.